everyone. I'm Peter Freer. I'm founder and CEO of Play Attention, and I'm delighted you're here so that we can talk about ADHD IQ, what we do need to know, and of course, the underlying elements, the root causes of ADHD, like executive function problems, those kinds of things. Since we are here, I know a lot of you have distractions that you need to address while you're here. It would be best if we actually, when we do this, that we eliminate the distractions so that we can pay enough attention to learn about the webinar and about what we're talking about right now. And I'll actually go into that in a little bit more detail. I started Play Attention, by the way, because I had so many students. I was a classroom teacher with a special emphasis in my master's degree in physics, electronics, computers, and programming, science, and programming, computer programming. I decided I would take all of those elements and develop Play Attention. And so this is our 31st year. And a lot of what we'll talk about is from the experience I have over 30 years in this field. So we've got a large list on the agenda. First, we want to just talk about what attention is. What is attention? Because it's really an abstract concept when you think about it. It's nothing that we can taste, sense, or smell. So we'll talk about that quite a bit. So we all begin on the same page. And we will go into the questions that are often confusing, myths and facts regarding ADHD, and why myths are so hazardous, right? Or pernicious. What happens if we get it right and we understand? How powerful is it when we gain a lot of understanding? Why attention deficit isn't the full story. This is a really important one. You can kind of see how this progresses just a little bit and better framing it so we understand it better. And then how how executive function actually affects daily life and real solutions that work. So we've got quite a long agenda. So hopefully you can hang with me. I will address questions at the very end of the webinar. And so if you would like to ask a question, save it for the end. You can type it in, and I'll do my best to answer you. Additionally, we are recording this, and this will be up on the web probably sometime tomorrow so that you can go through it again or share it with your friends if you need to. First, we're going to lay out what we know about attention, and I'll lay it out in general terms, not in neuroscience terms, particularly because it's more difficult to understand. But if we understand how important it is and how it relates to ADHD being attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or just inattentive type, then we actually can come to a deeper understanding. So I think that's the first thing I'd like to address with you. So you notice the statement here. It's a theme that I'm going to use throughout. Attention is the glue that binds our lives together. Because what are our lives? Our lives actually are composed of a series of events, aren't they? That if we pay enough attention to them, right, then we can, through our five senses, they become part of us if we pay enough attention. That means sitting out under a starry sky and awe and wonder of the universe and how small that actually makes us feel may be part of who we are if we paid enough attention to it. The moon and its beauty let us know that we're not sitting here as just one little planet in the middle of nothing. We're part of something much greater. We have a neighbor very close to us. But I wouldn't notice that if I weren't paying attention. Every beautiful sunset that I've ever seen, I take it in through my eyes. I feel the warmth of the sun. I can smell the water. All of this only if I have enough attention to it. Every kiss we've ever experienced in our lives, if we've paid attention at that time and my mind wasn't wandering or thinking about something else. then it becomes part of us because all of what we have seen, done, where we've been, what we've learned has been reduced in the brain to these neurons. The random firing of these neurons is who we are. And we've picked up the bits and pieces that through our five senses if we paid enough attention at the time. So, the question then arises, well, what have I missed my entire life? And if you have ADHD, whether it's inattentive type or hyperactivity or combined, you don't know. You don't know what you've missed. But as a parent of an ADHD child, or as a teacher or a coach or counselor, we know what they're missing, and we oftentimes try to help them. And so understanding what ADHD is and increasing our ADHD IQs, we can help them more if we have that information. But as I said when we started, the only way that you're going to be able to do that, to bind all these pieces of information together in the brain, is to not be distracted. And now our worlds are incredibly distracted, aren't they? Through cell phones and computers and TVs and every bit of information that's poured at us throughout the day. So what I'm asking you now is to turn off the distractions. Put away those screens that you don't need. Don't answer the emails. Listen carefully so that your brain can take this in. You can pay enough attention so that you can absorb all of this. That's key. And that's the root of one of the problems in attention deficit, isn't it? But there's far more than that. We'll go into that. And so that's why I'm saying attention is the glue that binds our lives together. All of those little pieces, what I'm remembering I learned at school, what my mom taught me about that big event I went to, all of that is put together as images as to who we are, right? It becomes part of us as our consciousness. It is all of our lives exist up here. And my mother died a while ago and had dementia. And so one quickly realizes when you're experiencing someone with dementia, what happens when that leaves that person, right? That awareness of who they are, all of what they paid attention to for years, and that leaves. We know that's an awful place to be, and that's not something that is pleasant for us to experience, even as a third party. But when you have something like ADHD, we're missing components of this ability to glue these pieces together. And that's why at school, an ADHD student can sometimes just miss instruction if the teacher's giving multiple instructions. Take your textbook out, turn to page 32, get a sheet of paper and a pencil out. And so they take their textbook out and they are totally lost, right? So attention is there. It's just not being able to be sustained and directed when they need it. So this is very, very important. When we are looking at this, we have to listen to how attention plays a role here. And it's not the full role. It's not the complete role. It's a part of this problem. But it is an essential part to understanding who we are and how we live. It's very, very, very important to understand that if you have enough attention, it helps you glue those pieces of your life together and live a fulfilling and happy life. Recently, many of you here took this test called the ADHD IQ Quiz. And although you were all incredibly smart, there were three questions that really fooled a lot of people, and people actually gave the wrong answers. And I really want to discuss those with you because they're very, very important. To start, question one, is ADHD considered a learning disability? And I think this is what fools a large portion of people here when we talk about ADHD. Is it actually a learning disability? Well, here in the United States, now we've got an international audience with us today, so it may differ in your country, but here in the United States, the answer is actually no. And everyone here kind of thinks, well, yeah, we hear on the news all the time that kids can get support. Well, they can get support, but not as ADHD being a learning disability. 58% of people on that test actually answered yes, it is a learning disability. But according to the US government here in the United States and the Learning Disabilities Association of America, ADHD is not classified as a learning disability. But if it is severe enough, right, if it actually impedes their ability to learn, then under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or Section 504, under US Code, if it significantly impacts their ability to learn, then they can get support under the categorization of other health impaired. So is it here in the United States considered a learning disability? No. And most countries outside of here, only a few of them really recognize it exists at all. So in the United States, it would be other health impaired, but it would not be a learning disability, which is kind of a shock to a lot of people, I think. One, because it definitely affects the way we learn. Question two that confused many people is, can ADHD be caused by trauma or hormonal changes like menopause? Because we have so many adult women who call in now to play attention and say, well, I just got diagnosed. I'm 63 and I just got diagnosed. But I knew for years I had ADHD. Could it be caused by menopause? So these are really good questions. Can divorce between, parents and the child starts acting out and the symptoms look like ADHD, could that have caused it? And this is a really good question. Again, the correct answer is no. Although 32% of people responding to that test that we issued, everyone said yes, absolutely. It doesn't cause ADHD. Now, can it contribute to the symptoms? Absolutely yes, right? Both trauma and hormonal shifts can increase the symptoms, but they don't cause it. So the wording is very, very careful. You should be very careful about the way you think about it. The root cause is not trauma or hormonal shifts, but could hormonal shifts or trauma, make worse the symptoms? And the answer to that is yes. So we need to just think very, very clearly, and I'll go discuss later on in the webinar why it's so harmful to not have the understanding in your mind about the way that these things are framed as very important. I'll discuss that because that's very important to know and understand. Now, is ADHD more common in boys than girls? And that is a poorly stated question. It's confusing. But if we just look at it and say, is it more common in boys than girls? The majority of people would say, yeah, boys. I know so many boys and so few girls that the correct answer actually is no. But, at the first bullet point at the top, you ask the wrong question and get the wrong answer, right? So the better question to ask is, do girls have ADHD with the frequency of boys? Do they get it just as much, right? Are they as likely as boys to have it? Then the question would be yes, most likely, right? But the reality is when we talk about this, is that if you're looking at just diagnosis, boys are diagnosed almost 2 to 1 over girls. But there's a reason for that because girls present a different set of symptoms. Boys present the most annoying ones, right? Calling out in class, being the class clown, not being able to, or to arguing with the teacher, those kinds of things. Those are squeaky wheels, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Remember that saying? So boys are diagnosed 2 to 1, but girls suffer in silence. They live in a world of daydreaming where they have difficulty paying attention. But since they're not creating a problem, they take on different labels. You may get a note home from the teacher saying, Kathy is really just a smart girl, lovely, but she's lazy. She doesn't finish anything. I don't know what she does all day. Things like that are harmful, and we need to discuss why that is so. But when we know that, it's most likely that there are just as many girls as boys. They just don't present symptoms that make the people around them, put up that red flag. Those sensors don't go up. But we really need to. We really need to, if they're struggling at all, we need to find the root cause and address it. And if it is ADHD, and likely at times you're going to meet them because, as I just mentioned, one of the phone calls that we get, one of the largest segment of the phone calls that we get are people, women especially, who've just been diagnosed in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they're now figuring it out. I had this all my life. Nobody found it, and now they finally found it. And there is a reason for that, because the awareness of ADHD in girls is going up. And we'll discuss this in more detail. But the correct answer, if we're asking this, let's just make it clear that if we had to say, okay, are boys diagnosed more frequently? Then yes, boys are diagnosed 2 to 1 over girls. Does that mean girls don't have it? No, and girls have it, and they have it in large numbers. They just don't present the symptoms to get it people alerted to it. But that's changing progressively. Right? How about a quick pop quiz here with no stress? All right. All right. And you can use your hands up on this. ADHD is caused by too much sugar or food dyes. If that's a yes, put your hand up. Okay. Keep going. You could do it. All right. So the answer to that is no, it doesn't cause it, right? It is not a cause of ADHD. Now, can it contribute to the symptoms, exacerbate them, make them worse? Absolutely can. But do they cause it? No, they don't cause it. All right. And this one you hear a lot because a lot of teachers say, oh, Jimmy's just really lazy. You know, um, Alex is very lazy. Cindy is very lazy. Is ADHD really just laziness? Hands up if you think so. Okay, we've got a very smart audience. Nobody is daring raise their hand on that one. It's true. It's not just laziness. There are a lot of different components involved. We'll discuss them later. All right, how about ADHD is really for kids? It's a kid-based disorder. And if you agree, hand up. Oh, okay. There are 3, 4, 5. All right. It isn't actually. It's not only for kids. And the second one down there right below it, ADHD disappears at a certain age. That's not necessarily true either. Neither one of those is true because it follows you from childhood. Now, it starts in childhood, but it isn't just for kids. It actually follows us about 90% of the time into adulthood. We'll discuss that in more detail. So it doesn't disappear at a certain age. You don't have to take that one. This last one is really good, though. ADHD is caused by poor parenting. How many people would agree to that? No one's agreeing to that. Well, that's good because poor parenting is not the cause of ADHD at all. Can it make the symptoms worse? You bet. And we'll go into that in more detail here in just a moment. All right. So the reason that we're doing this is so that we understand ADHD. We really understand the root causes, what it is, how it manifests, what the symptoms are, what do we do. This is incredibly powerful, right? But remember, in this webinar, you're going to learn that. But the only way that you can learn it is to use the glue that binds all of our lives together, and that is attention, right? So understanding it is powerful. If you want to become more powerful, then we have to pay attention. And that means we have to separate myth from fact, right? This is very, very important. Separating what is myth and fact, and then we're going to learn a little bit about why it's problematic to have myth. And you still see these myths propagated in and perpetuated on TikTok, YouTube, Reddit. I mean, a lot of this nonsense is still carried on. Even when you are listening to local news, you'll often see a story, you know, oh, children have ADHD, it's a childhood disorder. All right. That's a myth. All right. The fact is far different than that. It is not just a childhood disorder. It doesn't go away. When you turn 18, 19, 20, it doesn't go away. The symptoms may shift, but they don't vanish. Around 90% of those diagnosed in childhood still experience it in adulthood. All right. And these are functions that are related to something called executive function. I'm going to go into that in detail in just a moment. But if you are a child, you're going to carry that throughout your lifetime. There's a high percentage of that. But then, if the statistics say, well, it's only around 90%, do some people actually, doesn't it vanish? Well, their symptoms shift and they get control over their executive function. So they have figured out ways to change their brains. So we'd say maybe a percentage of that 10% that doesn't carry it into adulthood, probably some of them were misdiagnosed and it was something else entirely. But there is a percentage of them that actually found a way to change their brains so that the way their brains function is different. And it solves their problems, that reduces their symptoms dramatically. And that's why the reason I developed Play Attention, 30, 35 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago now, um, that would tell you why. Because there is a way. The brain can make significant changes, especially in executive function, which is a large part of ADHD, right? Remember, we just talked about this. ADHD is just poor parenting. If we don't understand this can result in a real traumatic situation at home. And I want to discuss this in detail with those parents who are here. All right. We know that poor parenting is not the cause. It is a brain-based problem, right? Disorder. But it can, if you're not parenting well, it can increase stress for both parents and child. And then, of course, that increases the symptoms, right? So it said the next bullet point, it can exacerbate the symptoms if if you have poor parenting skills. What are these poor parenting skills? Well, I lacked consistency as a parent. I don't reinforce them when I see them doing good things. I don't really even understand why they're like this and they confound me. I don't know why my child, something so trivial can set my child off on an explosive thunderstorm of emotion. I don't understand it. And so all of this, if children struggle with emotion regulation and they do explode at times, this is just another problem with executive function. Emotion regulation is a component of executive function. But that last bullet point down there, this can create a negative cycle where the child's ADHD symptoms made worse by the parenting environment. And the parenting environment is negatively impacted by the child's ADHD. Do you see this downward spiral right there? And how many people here, you are anonymous, so no one else will see you. How many people here are experiencing this last bullet point? right now that this is just so hard for me and I don't get it. They don't get it. And all we do is this constant battle at home. And it may carry over into the grocery store. It may carry over at school. Well, that's a lot of us. Wow, that is a lot of it. There are a lot of us here responding, saying, yeah, that's us. That's what we do. And I don't know how to handle it. That might necessitate, just thinking of it, a parenting webinar and just good practices at parents, just so you, number one, understand exactly how they're functioning, and number two, know how to respond correctly. If you're interested in that, just type in um, parenting um, 101 for ADHD, and I will make certain that we put one on the books and notify you. That way you can come back and be delighted to do that for you because there are ways to make life easier. And it is incredibly good for everyone here that is not familiar on how to do that. We'd be delighted to work with you on that. Excellent. Thank you so much. Myth number three. ADHD people just can't focus. That's all it is. They just can't focus. Well, that is a huge myth, right? Because if you're a parent of someone who hasn't, and this was a question earlier, a parent said, well, I know my child can hyperfocus. And that's true. You put them in front of a video game, something they're really interested in, you can come and step in the room and say, it's time for dinner, come on. And they don't hear you. You have to go over and shake them a little bit and go, hey, it is time for dinner, put that down. And then their focus gets changed, right? They now can pay attention to you. You say, I said dinner is ready, come in here now. And then they'll finally come in, maybe with a little bit of an argument. But that's called hyperfocus. They have an ability to attend, and they also have a trait called hyperfocus so that if it's really interesting to them, they can just exclude everything else and hyperfocus. That's not attention, that's hyperfocus. So they can do it. It is a real challenge for them to be able to sustain and direct attention at will, especially if it's homework, especially if it's cleaning my room, things I don't really like that are not interesting to me. And if I'm not a prolific reader, then I don't want to read a book. There's boring, you know? So if that makes them feel basically overwhelmed at times by even asking them to do those things, and then you as a parent may get into a battle over it. I don't care if it's boring to you. I need that room cleaned. You're going to clean your room. And so there are ways to address that that will help you out. That'll be part of the parenting webinar. So sustaining attention is difficult for them, but that is a part of executive function. So, you notice here the funnel just starts driving down toward executive function. Executive function seems to be what is critically absent here or weak. Here's the one that really troubles me because I hear it a lot. I used to be a teacher, and so many other teachers I was working with who were ADHD themselves. What better job for a teacher than to have 25, 30 different little fires to put out all day long? All my attention just keeps shifting, right? It's a perfect place for an ADHD person. But as a teacher, when I meet another ADHD person, I don't get them. I don't understand them. And then we're going to butt heads. How many of you have received a note home from a teacher who said, your child's lazy. He's just lazy. He can't focus on anything. And then you're questioning about, and you look at the teacher, and I was a technician in the schools for a long time. So I would be in classrooms fixing computers and printers. And I would watch this teacher, would say, don't make me repeat myself. Why do I always have to repeat my instructions to you 3 times? Yet in a faculty meeting, that same teacher would put her hand up to the principal who just announced that he needed this done, something done. Teacher would raise her hand. She goes, I didn't catch that, Bob. Could you repeat that? And that's the same teacher that was yelling at that child in the classroom for repeating herself. So, yeah, ADHD people are not lazy. They just don't have certain cognitive skills. Either missing or weak, and that's executive function. And if we understand that, it can be so um, enlightening to us about how this is all happening. What do I do? How do I make changes here? This is incredibly important. All right. Again, this is one of the things I like to say, excuse me, about telling them they're to try harder, focus more, try harder. Because if their brain is not equipped for it, if I have truly have ADHD, I don't have those executive functions. And my teacher is saying, and my parents are saying, come on, try harder. Will you focus more? You're just lazy. When you're doing that, and telling them this, it's like telling someone who is nearsighted, hey, will you not just see better? How about it? Try harder to see better. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work, right? If their brain is not equipped to do it, you can ask them and beg them and yell at them all you want. It's not going to change, right? They have to have improvement in executive function to do all of this. Is everybody with me? Is this easy enough to follow at this time? If you don't understand anything, remember you can mention it, you can say it, and I'll answer questions at the end of the webinar as well. But I hope this you're able to follow. All right. This is why it's important to make certain we have a common difference between fact and fiction, right? Myth and fact. They're not just annoying, especially if you know and you deal with ADHD. They're harmful, right? The problem in believing myths is that they can take you down a wrong road. For example, if I see this sold on a lot of websites, on TikTok, on YouTube, Facebook, they just say, take these magic drops and your child's going to focus better. Is that going to fix ADHD? Number one, does that even work? Chances are not really. Um, you can change your diet and sleep patterns and have better attention. Is that going to cure ADHD? No, right? So we can travel down these various rabbit holes, but the real point here is that we have to get to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem typically is executive function. We'll reframe this here, talk about what reframing means, especially internally. All right. If we think that ADHD or believe it that it's caused by sugar or bad parenting, we don't look for the real root. Brain-based differences and executive function. Brain-based differences in executive functions, right? So when we're looking at this, we need to make certain that we're going to the root of it and not taking myths like they're just lazy, they can't focus, they've got too much sugar, their parents don't discipline them enough. If we live there, then we don't get them the proper help that they need, the proper support that they need. All right? Here are the common consequences of believing this nonsense. Remember we talked about this? Girls and women go undiagnosed for years because they received a label early on. She's just lazy. She's just stupid, right? She doesn't want to finish anything. She never finishes anything, right? But when you carry that into adulthood, then you believe, well, I'm just lazy. People have told me for years I'm just lazy. And you think that you believe that. And then you struggle with your relationships, you struggle with work, when in actuality it's not true at all. No one's ever just figured out what's going on. So they're harmful to believe these myths and carry them forward, which is why they should stop here after this webinar. They should stop here because you have been now enlightened as to what this problem actually is, and let's get to the root of it. Parents often feel often feel that they are blamed, right, instead of supported. Well, if you had just disciplined that kid, this wouldn't happen. I've heard principals say this to parents. And I mean, it was just an amazing thing to witness, you know? And again, it goes back to if you're nearsighted and you're yelling at the kid going, see better, you need to see better, try harder. It's not going to work, right? If teachers misread behavior as defiance or laziness, not going to help. Got to get to the root. People internalize the idea that they're not trying hard enough. So they try to please everybody all the time. They do their best, and it's a road to failure. You probably have noticed that. If you're an adult here and you find yourself turning backflips to try to please people, if you have ADHD and you've tried it for years and it doesn't work, and you found that you've lost relationships, you've lost friendships, you can't do well at work doing that because you just can't reach that level of perfection. It's not going to work. But someone's set that pattern for you early on. Now, this last bullet point here, incredibly important. All right. When we don't have the accurate information, we just don't misunderstand ADHD. We misunderstand the people who live with it. Can't tell you how important that is. We have to have accurate information so we understand the people that we're living with or we're teaching, right? Or we have relationships with. All of it can be rather challenging. But if we have the information, we have the understanding, it becomes far easier. Here's what we've seen at Play Attention for years in increasing executive function. We've seen more girls and women are being properly identified. They come to us and say, I need to increase executive function. How do I do it? Adults are recognizing symptoms they've lived with for years, saying, I should have known this when I was 5 years old and I'm 70. But they're ready to make changes. Schools are adopting better support models when they understand this. Now, many schools still don't understand, and you may be in one of those districts where your school just doesn't get it. And so you sometimes have to be the proponent, right? The advocate that goes in and tries to get them to understand, because you are supported by governmental law, by federal law. They have to understand that, and they have to provide support, right? So when we make executive function a focus, not an afterthought, then things will change. And again, I'll get into executive function in just a moment. Also, if you have progress, then shame is replaced with strategy and support. I no longer have to feel that I am lazy or stupid and shamed by it. I can actually change my life with good support, good strategy. I hope this is making sense. So, why isn't ADHD, right? Attention deficit, the full story? And I want to make this akin to something like uh, we used to call it global warming. Do you remember when that came out? Global warming. And people were going, global warming. We still get very cold winters here. I don't see any global warming. Well, then they changed that definition to climate change, saying, with climate change, you're going to see more serious storms. You're going to see more flooding. You're going to see more hurricanes. And people were going, holy cow, I am seeing more hurricanes. Their awareness came off. I am seeing worse storms than we've ever had. We see flooding. So if you frame it as attention deficit, it does no one any good. It really doesn't, because that's just the very tip of this iceberg. I love that first bullet. Hasn't done us any favors to label it like that. One thing is clear, the name itself is misleading, right? Because if they think they have a deficit of attention, they don't have attention, then that's wrong. We know they have plenty of attention. They can't pay attention and sustain it for great periods of time. And so this is a problem. but they have plenty of it. If you went to your ADHD child, they're sitting in the living room staring out the window, or you see that child at school, say, Jimmy, what's happening? Jimmy can tell you a little bit about what the bird outside the window sitting in a limb of a tree is doing. He'll tell you about a little bit about those people out in the hall are walking by. He'll tell you about a little bit about who's whispering something behind him. He'll tell you a little bit about what you were doing as a teacher in front of the classroom. Does he have a lot of information on any of that? No. He has bits and pieces of all this. So those bits and pieces don't amount to much because he doesn't even have sustained and directed attention to any one thing for very long. Another curious thing you see is, and many of you here may have done this, you may use flashcards with your child to try to teach them multiplication tables. And you do the flashcards and you do them so much one night you both are you're tired and you're bleary eyed and you've got to go to bed, and it seems at that point they got it. They can do the flashcards. The next day they go in and take a test and they've forgotten everything. Who's seen that? Hands up. Who has seen that? You've struggled to get them to understand it, and it looks like all of a sudden it just evaporates, right? So, what the heck is going on? Well, if they're only able to pay little bits of attention to it here and there, they picked up a few things, a little couple of things, and the next day it's going to be gone, right? This means that we have to be able to get them to sustain and direct their attention, but that's only one piece of it, right? And yelling at them, we now know, not going to help. Punishing them, not going to help, right? Because if you remember the glasses and metaphor, right? It's like having nearsightedness. If someone's nearsighted and I'm saying, please do better, view, see better, we're not going to change anything. And that's what we're asking them to do if we're trying to punish them and redirect them. Like, it's not going to happen. But I think it's confusing to most parents. You have a child that can play a video game for 2 hours, and you say, see, he can focus. He just doesn't want to on cleaning his room. His Remember, it's not that he just doesn't want to. He just doesn't have the skill sets to do it. The video game is very exciting, and so his brain is tuned to very exciting things. Cleaning my room is not exciting. My brain just does not have the skill for it. Now, you're not going to let them use that as an excuse because we can train them to use their brain to be able to do that. And that's the parenting webinar that we'll do. But it's really important to understand that, because if you don't understand that, remember that goes back to our parenting skills, then we're fighting about it. And is that going to make it any better? Well, most of you here that are doing that right now, and that was a vast majority of us, no, that doesn't work. All right. So it isn't about the lack of attention. It's about the difficulty in regulating my attention at will. All right. They can hyperfocus on things that are rewarding or stimulating. So it's inconsistent cognitive control when and where and how their attention is used. So if we're to frame it better, and by framing, how do we put it in a frame that actually makes sense? So it's not global warming, it's climate change. It's not attention deficit, it's executive function challenges. Executive function is the brain's ability to manage things from organizing, planning, emotion regulation, being able to self-check. All these things are part of that. And chances are they just don't have them. They're very weak. And we often ask ourselves, well, why? Well, it's a brain difference, right? We expect everyone by their early 20s to have cognitive skills that support executive function. But for some of us, it doesn't happen for various reasons. And typically it's a brain difference that causes it when we get diagnosed as ADHD. But that's, just a piece of this problem that we have to understand. Executive functions are actually a set of skills. You think of Liam Neeson in the movie Taken. a certain set of skills. And in this case, it's everything from emotion regulation, mental flexibility, self-monitoring, task initiation, planning, organization, prioritizing, inhibitory control, working memory, attention. And the list actually goes a little bit longer on this, but you get the idea, right? For some reason or the other, they have a brain difference. These skills are underdeveloped, but they are absolutely trainable. And that's one of the reasons I developed Play Attention, because they're trainable. What do I do to train my child or myself as a 65-year-old person to say, huh, can I improve my brain? Can I improve my brain function? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. You surely can. Brain function can be improved at any age, right? At any age, provided the correct stimulation. And this is what executive function is. And this is how it is related to ADHD. ADHD, as we now know, it's wrong label. There is no deficit of attention. They have plenty of it. They have troubles directing it, right? And they have problems with executive function. That's all part of ADHD. But it would be a really long term if we included all of that. But if we just call it executive function challenges, then we kind of understand, okay, these are all key components that they have to have, I have to have, everyone has to have if they're functioning well. If some of them are weak, then we're not functioning well. You can think of this, and this is a good way if you're not into, the psychological or scientific view, you want to think of it in a way that can make your brain say, "Oh, I got it. Okay." So imagine executive function is the control tower at the airport, right? If your brain is like an airport, you've got planes coming in, you got planes taking off, you got planes that are way out here. I don't want them to hit other planes. Right? So think of your brain. Basically, the executive function is right here. It is my control tower, right? If my executive function is really good, I can clearly decide what planes are to take off and when they are to take off, right? So they're not going to hit anybody else. I can decide which planes are going to come in and land safely as these take off. This is all good control tower, good executive function. I can say, you can't come in just yet. I'm backed up a little bit here. You're going to get delayed. All right. I pause distractions to do that. That's part of executive function. I'm going to redirect traffic when storms roll in, right? That's emotion regulation and how to coordinate everything so nobody hits each other. That is mental flexibility, right? So that's just like being in an airport. But now you can say, oh, this is my brain. This is how it's working or not working. I hope this is clear. So when executive function is struggling and those things are not working, a plane's just circled the airport calling in saying, I'm running out of fuel. That is similar to me not being able to finish any tasks. I'll start 50 tasks, but I finish none of them, right? That is when executive function is struggling. And if you notice this in yourself, your spouse, or your kids or your students, then you understand why. Some crash into each other. Some of the planes will actually crash into each other, and then we're overwhelmed, and that causes frustration. That's executive function problems. Important ones get forgotten on the runway. They miss their deadlines. They lose their items. They're not knitting the pieces of their life together. That is part of executive function as well. And you may hyper-focus on one plane, and you forget there's that hyper-focus problem. I can hyper-focus on that one plane, but I don't know what to do with those others. I don't even see them. I don't even know they're there. So all of these, if you think about this, it's kind of clear to you now how this is operating in their brain, and yelling at them or punishing them or, trying, little tricks it's not going to help unless we get to the root of the situation. Here's how executive function affects your daily life, right? If we're at home, we have a 20-minute homework assignment, it's taking 2 hours in a fight, not helpful, right? I can never arrive on time, or my child is consistently late. I'm always hearing it from the classroom teacher, and it may be caused from me because I am consistently late. All right. They can't clean a room, managing emotions during transitions. Sometimes we're in the grocery store and my child goes off and I have no clue why. And this is in public and I can feel my face getting red. Anyone here identify with that? Does that resonate? And it just is something that is so bizarre. Why is he going off on this? I don't get it. Why does she fall to pieces when this happens? It shows up at school, at work, and home. Right? And if you're struggling here as an adult that has it, and I have no relationships, I don't get it. I don't know why people think that they're annoyed by me at times. And I try everything to make it work with them. And so you're frustrated. If you understand that and you're here because of that, then you actually know that's an executive function issue. By the way, this is why, and I mentioned this before, we do this to get the right support so your life it's going to change your life, and this is exactly what it does. So when you're strengthening executive function, can the brain make change? And as we know, this is called neuroplasticity. Brain can change at any time of your life. It doesn't matter if you're 4 to 104. The brain will continue to change as long as you're giving it the correct stimulation. And then medication is useful for some people because it actually helps them focus. But if you stop the medication, that happened here in the States because a lot of the medication became uh, non-available, unavailable. People were waiting outside pharmacies because their whole world evolved around that. So if you take that Band-Aid off, the medication's Band-Aid off, you're still the same person underneath it, and you struggle if you're not on it. But can you train your brain to do that without medication and be able to increase your executive function? Absolutely. Absolutely can. Absolutely can. We've been doing it for 30 plus years. What would you like to improve to do that? Whether it's anything from mindfulness, working memory, short-term memory, completing tasks, all that kind of thing. So you can take the online ADHD test, by the way. It's on our website. If you want a link to it, just type in ADHD test, and it will tell us what particular things you need to achieve, what your executive functions are that you need to achieve or your child needs to achieve. So just type in ADHD test, and then we'll send you the link to that so that you can take it and figure out what it is that you need to address with your child or with yourself, all of those kind of things. And then if after the test, you want to talk to a specialist in executive function, then type in consultation. It's free. So you take the test, it goes, here are the executive functions that are weak for you. Um, and you want to talk to a specialist about it so they can say, oh, all right, here's what you do to increase executive function, impulse control, um, motor skills, time on task, attention, stamina, that kind of thing. And then next week, there's a whole play attention webinar to explain how play attention actually works. So type in webinar if you'd like to visit that webinar. All of this is free. They'll just send you links to do it. And that way we can help you every step of the way. And then if you have not put it in and you want the webinar on parenting, put in parenting webinar or our parenting 101 webinar. We'll do that as well. And let's see if there's anything else I'm missing here. Oh, I'm going to repeat this, right? This is the final slide, I think. Understanding ADHD is powerful. Getting the right support is life-changing, game-changing, life-changing. Because now that you understand what you're up against, can we make those changes that will change the life of the people we love? Or will it change my life, right? Or it could change my students' lives. That's why we're here, and that's what this was all about. I really appreciate you spending time with us. Again, a recording will be issued tomorrow regarding this, so you can share this presentation with someone else if you need to. And let me um, go ahead, and there are some questions in chat here that I may have missed, so I'm going to oh no, my staff wants me to go back one slide. So again, um, type in any of those that you want. We'll send you links to all of those so that you can get what you need in support. All right, let me see if I've missed any questions for anyone, or if you have questions, now would be the time to type them in. All right, I have told everyone that slides will be made available. Um, Karen, it's good to see you here. Um, I'm so worried about ADHD kids, increased risk for addiction or doing things that need to be accepted and feel normal. Any reassurance or advice? You start early on that, and that's a really good question. Karen says she's worried about, addiction with the risk of that, taking the medications and such, and that kids just want to feel normal. So if you start early, then you don't have to worry about that, right? You can start at any time in life. Starting early is better. If you can start at any time, though, you can help them change the way they cope with life using play attention, just learning the skills they need to learn. Because remember, medication is a band-aid. You're still underneath it, you're the same. It's just a band-aid that's temporary. Okay, let's see if there's anything else I'm missing here. Boy, there's so many of these. Karen put in, I got diagnosed at 41. Both my children are also ADHD. Sadly, my daughter's specialist informed us she will not grow out of it. And that's why you don't see adults with ADHD. She will grow. Oh, your specialist informed us she will grow out of it. And that's why you don't see adults with ADHD. I nearly spit my water out. I can so identify with that because it's not true. I don't know why a specialist would tell you that, but it's so ridiculous. Good catch, though. And thank you for sharing that. Um, Hannah asks, can this work conversely? For example, no noticeable symptoms in childhood, but symptoms develop later in life, or would this be associated with aging, hormonal shifts? That's a really good question. Yes, hormonal shifts typically, especially if you're in menopause, or you have trauma. Typically, these were minor when you had them as a child, but they could become more profound, all right, more pronounced if you're older, all right. If the problem is executive function, then you have to get to the root of it. All right, that's a really good question. It's the first time I think anyone's ever asked me that, but that's a very, very good question. I think that's almost all of it. And again, we're over time, I think now. Oh no, we're still 1 minute under time. I am very, very excited. If I've missed any of your questions, there were so many, there are hundreds in here, and I tried to get as many as I could. But I really appreciate you being here. Obviously, the internet is fantastic for letting us all, come together and share in the moment. But remember, the more we understand about this, the more powerful we become, and the more that we can change life. So if there's anything else we can do for you, let us know. Thank you so much. Again, you'll get an email with this video, a link to this video for tomorrow. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure. Take care, everyone.